Hey guys, if you want to learn the best exercises to build muscle fast, then stick around because I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to design your own programs or programs for your clients if you're a PT or coach. So when it comes to choosing exercises to help you build muscle better, there's 6 important factors that you need to really understand in order to design a program for yourself or maybe for a client. So what I want to do today is discuss those 6 factors, break them down and give you guys some key takeaways that you can use for yourself. So point number 1 is stimulus fatigue ratio. So what the hell is that? What does that even mean? So stimulus fatigue ratio is basically how much stimulus do you get from a given exercise and what is the trade-off in terms of fatigue that is accumulated from that exercise. So to give you a quick example, if you were trying to say grow your hamstrings, there's going to be different levels of fatigue accumulated from say a deadlift as opposed to maybe like a lying hamstring curl or a seated hamstring curl. So what we need to understand is there needs to be a good mixture of exercises that you use within your program that will, I guess, allow you to get the most benefit with the least, accumulated fatigue. So we want to choose exercises appropriately so that we're not continually bashing ourselves into the ground and getting too fatigued and maybe injured down the line. But we also want to get a good stimulus from those exercises. So I think it's important that you choose exercises appropriately, but also exercises that can be, overloaded in the long term. So point number 2, mind-muscle connection. So when it comes to hypertrophy or building muscle, having a strong mind-muscle connection is super important. So what is mind-muscle connection? Basically, how well can you recruit a given muscle throughout a particular exercise? So for example, like the most common one I can probably think of right now is like a bicep curl, right? If you're training biceps, you might be doing a barbell bicep curl. The idea is to actually recruit the bicep, to be able to feel the biceps when you're doing the exercise and not necessarily just lifting weights, from point A to point B. So I think there's some important, factors and considerations that can be taken away from, powerlifting strength-based sort of training. In the sense that we want to progressively overload. But our goal with hypertrophy is to, get a good full range of motion, get a pump, have a good mind-muscle connection, so feel the target, intended muscle group, and not necessarily just moving from A to B in the fastest or the shortest range of motion. Because if you guys, follow any powerlifting or anyone that does any sort of strength training, you'll see that a lot of their sort of training sessions, they're trying to lift as much weight as possible. They're trying to do it within the shortest range of motion and just get it as fast, from point A to point B. Where hypertrophy, we can have some of that stuff, but not all of our exercises should be like that. So just to recap on that one, we want a good mind-muscle connection. We want to train with a full range of motion, and we really want to feel the intended muscle, not just lift the weight and move it from point A to point B. So point number 3, tension and pumps. So these are actually pretty important despite how often they get sort of dispelled and people talk about pumps and tension not really being important. The pathway at which hypertrophy is achieved is basically through the metabolic stress pathway. So the idea that metabolite accumulation within the muscle sort of swells those cells up and we get a hypertrophy response from that cell swelling. If you're a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I'm a huge fan, he always talked about in his training, feeling the pump. And he likened it to coming in the gym, right? So if you want to have a good training session, get a pump because Arnold did it. And it's like coming. But basically we want to have exercises that allow us to, again, create lots of tension. So we want to be able to, have a strong mind-muscle connection. We want lots of tension within that muscle group. But we also want to feel a pump. So we should get that, nice tight feeling in the biceps if we're doing bicep curls. If we're doing chest flyers, we want a nice full, chest once we've done our sort of working sets. But a caveat to this is if you're no longer, getting a pump when you train, for example, could be a sign that you're potentially overreached or overtraining and could indicate that you potentially need a deload. Or if you aren't doing enough training volume and you aren't getting a pump through those workouts and you aren't overtrained, you're just doing way too little work, then it could be an indication that you probably need to bump up your training volume to again accumulate more volume through that intended muscle group. Point number 4, low joint pain. How many times have you been in the gym and in the pursuit of gains, in the pursuit of growing muscle, we have a pain, we have a niggle, we have annoying sort of injury, dull pain, whatever you want to call it, and we just keep training through it. It's really, really important that we become aware of that, and we know that it's probably not conducive to what we're actually trying to achieve. So muscle growth, we want to train pain-free, we want to use exercises that we can get a full range of motion without pain. So there are no magic exercises you have to do, like you don't have to squat, you don't have to deadlift, you don't have to bench press. They're all great exercises, but if they cause pain, particularly joint pain, then they're probably not great for you. So you need to choose exercises that suit your individual circumstances, that suit your individual biomechanics, profile, whatever you want to call it, so that you can train comfortably and progress consistently. I think it's a pretty important point. So stay away from things that cause pain. Pretty common sense, but a lot of people keep pushing through for whatever reason because they think, squats are great for their legs, but they get knee pain. So maybe there's a better alternative. So you need to probably look at your overall training split, look at the things that are happening to you on an individual level, and adjust accordingly. As we spoke about before, fatigue accumulation occurs acutely from specific exercises, like we sort of mentioned, like deadlifts will cause acute fatigue in maybe the hamstrings, low back, glutes, those types of things. But also fatigue accumulation happens chronically. So if you're training days on end, weeks on end, months on end, you accumulate quite a lot of systemic fatigue that can cause burnout, overtraining, injuries, all those types of things. So we need to sort of find a strategy that we can consistently progress and also recover enough that we can facilitate that growth and progress moving forward. So how the hell do you do that? The answer is deloads. So if you haven't heard of deloads before, it's basically a period of time within your training cycle that you might reduce total sets, load on the bar, and a combination of both. Just in general, it's reducing overall volume to allow your fatigue to dissipate and your fitness to increase. So the general rule is that as you accumulate fatigue, your fitness is masked by fatigue. So in order to bring that fatigue down and express your fitness, i.e. gains, we need to have some sort of deload strategy. So there's two sort of important factors with this one, and I guess two strategies that I use for my own training for all the clients that I sort of see every day, every week. And they are sort of a proactive approach and a reactive approach. The proactive approach is where we deliberately build in a deload phase within a program. So if we look at maybe a 12-week training cycle, we've got 3 4-week phases. The 4th week of every program typically will be a deload week. So we might have week 1, week 2, week 3, where we're building volume, we're overloading each week, but we're also accumulating fatigue. And then we get to week 4, we potentially have a drop in volume. We allow that fatigue to dissipate before we start our next program. So the idea is that we build for 3 weeks, deload, build for 3 weeks, deload, and continue in that fashion. The second one is that reactive approach. So reactive approach would basically be set out a training block, let's say again 12 weeks, you go along your training program, you keep progressing each week, and you wait. You wait for your fitness to sort of drop, you wait for that fatigue to accumulate, and then you employ a deload strategy. So how would you know? This is probably a question I get a lot as well. How would you know if you use that reactive approach or that auto-regulated deload approach? How the hell do you know when you should actually do it? Like what things are you looking for that will indicate you need to have a deload? So the big one would be like a decrease in training performance. So is your performance actually stagnating or going backwards? Your energy levels, so like how are you feeling every day? Your energy in the gym, energy outside of the gym, has it gotten worse? Probably a good indication that you need a deload. Your mood, so typically like if you're feeling crappy, tired, stressed, angry, all of those things, again, probably a sign you need a deload. But some other important things you need to look out for are, maybe like niggles, injuries, low libido, appetite, disrupted sleep. That's probably quite a lot to look at. So I think for most people, if you're keeping an eye out on those factors and you find that they're sort of outside the norm and you've been training pretty hard, pretty consistently, then it's probably time for a deload. And once you do deload, anywhere from like, a couple of days up to a week is a pretty good starting point, and then you should see, once you're back in the gym, hey, all of those things are now better, my training's progressing, and I feel good. Fantastic, you nailed it. So point number 6 is choosing appropriate loads. So ensuring that you're not training too heavy or too light. So what do we mean by appropriate loads? Because basically the load that you choose for each exercise or for your entire program is going to be dictated by your rep schemes. So when we look at particular rep schemes and the loads associated with them, a lot of the research at the moment and a lot of sort of anecdotal evidence from, myself training clients and people that I speak to in the fitness industry and just being generally involved within the fitness industry for the last 15 years, it seems that the majority of your training should be done anywhere between that 6 to 30 rep range. So that means in terms of choosing appropriate loads, it's anywhere from your 6 rep max all the way up to your 30 rep max. And that seems to be a pretty good spread in terms of getting enough load on the bar, but also getting enough volume. So ideally, if we're staying within that rep bracket, it's basically keeping us away from exercises that are too heavy, that cause too much fatigue, and it's keeping us away from exercises that we're doing too much volume, so above 30 reps, for example, that are typically too light to actually express any hypertrophy responses. So if you're staying within that 6 to 30 rep range, your loads should be pretty spot on and you should be getting pretty consistent gains throughout your training cycle. So when you're looking at that rep spread, it's probably a smart idea to have some sort of periodization strategy where you stick within a particular rep range for a certain amount of time and then progress, potentially every couple of weeks, every couple of months, so that you always move throughout that range and you can always come back and look to beat your loads or beat your volume for a particular rep spread. All right, guys, so to wrap this one up, there are 6 key factors that you need to consider when writing your own programs or writing programs for clients. These are optimal SFR ratios, so stimulus fatigue ratios, a high mind-muscle connection when training in the gym, tension and pumps, low joint pain, fatigue management, and appropriate loads and volume. All right, so that's it from me, guys. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.